Repeal the Second Amendment is an article, or I should say again, I fell into that, a piece that I wrote, an opinion piece this morning that I encourage all of you to put out there on your websites, because I lay out what the left should do if they really want to repeal the Second Amendment. And that's what retired Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens wrote about in the op-ed. And many on the left jump all over and said he's right. But maybe they didn't read what he wrote, where he said that for the people isn't really the people or the individual. But he never ended that closed loop. He never closed that loophole, I should say. It's for the people doesn't mean the individual, which is very interesting. And as I pointed out, for those of you who weren't listening last hour, if for the people doesn't mean the people, and he means it in context. He was talking about the Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And he writes, he being John Paul Stevens, I'm trying to find it. Stevens claims that the Second Amendment explicit mention of the right of the people, quote unquote, does not create an, quote, individual right, end quote. So if, it's very simple, if for the people in the Constitution, in the Second Amendment, does not mean an individual, it means what? It means the government then. Well, no, it doesn't. It means a collaboration of people. Well, that's the government. Well, it doesn't. Okay, well, then I can put forth, as I said, Renk's protectors of the weak. I could put our group together, and now we are people who can be loaded to the hill with guns. Oh, no. He doesn't mean that. He means what? The government? Well, again, if he means the government, then you better look at the 4th, 9th, and 10th Amendment, because for the people does not mean that. It means, you can't say it doesn't mean the individual in the Second Amendment, but it does mean it in the 4th, 9th, and 10th. Now, before I get too deep into it, I was pretty excited about that, as you thought, and I would love for people to try to blow a hole through it. I want to know, well, I have online with us. Where am I going here? I'm so excited. I'm forgetting myself. Online with me right now is State Senator Patrick Colbeck. State Senator Patrick Colbeck is running for governor in the Republican primary here in the state of Michigan, as I stated prior to the break, against Bill Schuette, Attorney General, Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley, and Dr. Jim Hines. Welcome to the show, Senator Colbeck. Appreciate you having you on.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, especially on one of my favorite topics. One of the hot topics is Second Amendment, and I think you framed it right. I got to go read your article now. I'm very interested in what you got to say there.
I appreciate that, Senator Colbeck, because I'm telling people, blow a hole in it. I challenged people last hour, blow a hole in it, because if you don't, then you logically have to agree with me, which then puts things in a different perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, if I had one amendment that I could put back in put in the Constitution, it would be that we had to rule in accordance with original intent. And so all these Supreme Court justices, if they want to color outside of the lines of that original intent, well, we're going to color them back inside the lines. And that would be very interesting, because we had this big argument when we were working on the new social studies standards that I was fighting some indoctrination that was going on. We were debating over democracy versus republic. And if you go back to original intent, Ben Franklin once said famously that a democracy is like two wolves and a lamb voting on what's for lunch. And then he went on to say that liberty is a well-armed lamb. So this right to bear arms is essentially your right to defend yourself against the tyranny of the majority.
Right, no matter who that majority might be. And it's, again, I'm hoping someone can blow a hole in mine. Well, I'm not. I'm challenging people to do it, because if not, then I'm on the right path there, along with this gentleman from the Federalist that I quote in there, who kind of got me going down that path and thinking, wow, what a great point. Now, So, Senator Colbeck, it's been a while since we had you on. You are running in the Republican primary to run against the Democrat, whoever wins in their primary, to be the next governor of the great state of Michigan. What is going on? I know that there was a recent movement in the campaign where we're looking at the Chamber of Commerce. Why don't you explain it to my listeners?
Well, this is endorsement season. All the endorsements are coming out, and I'm a Microsoft small business specialist. I've been that way for a while. I'm a small business owner, been very consistent in supporting the cause of the small businesses, and it was kind of interesting just to show you how ingrained the swamp is and how they protect their own up in Lansing as well as in D.C. They didn't even extend the courtesy of an interview during the gubernatorial debate process or gubernatorial interview process for endorsements at the Michigan Chamber before they granted that endorsement out to the Attorney General. And
wait, hold on. So they put out an endorsement of a person without interviewing or discussing anything with the other candidates, viable candidates in the race.
Yeah, I'm already on the ballot. It's not like I'm...
So is Brian Calley on the ballot?
I don't think he's formally got his signatures yet.
Well, that's interesting. So they're supporting someone who's not formally on the ballot, and they didn't even speak...
Attorney General's on the ballot, and he's the one they endorsed.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was Calley, you said.
No.
Oh, it was Schuette. Okay,
yeah.
Okay. All right. I got that wrong. I was confused about that because I did know that Schuette had come out.
No, the guy with zero private sector experience except scooping ice cream at Farrell's got the endorsement, so it was very interesting.
Wait. What's wrong with scooping ice cream at Farrell's?
It's good if you're the one eating it.
In fact, I don't know if you just brought me way back. They used to have a Farrell's back to what did they used to call that? On your birthday, you went and got that boat or something. You remember that?
Yeah, I forgot the name of it, but we had a place out on Telegraph in 96 area there that I had 3 birthdays a year because every time it was your birthday, you'd have this fire wagon come in. I forget what they called it, but it was like a gallon of ice cream.
Yeah, it was awesome. Anyway, but yeah, you're right. So the Chamber of Commerce that deals with business is endorsing a person who's never been in business.
Yep.
All right. That
just shows how it works. I mean, that's the system. And it's like we'll be fine with or without that endorsement. That's not the issue. What I want to highlight, though, is how government really works on the inside. There is a government class, if you will, that protects its own. A lot of people call it the swamp, and it really is active. And they do anything they can to silence the voice of folks that would threaten that swamp and threaten their cushy little arrangement that they have between Republicans and Democrats alike. And it's kind of frustrating, but we're working through it, and I think a lot of people are seeing through it. That's what we saw in the last presidential election, the election of President Trump. People are tired of this politics as usual, and I can guarantee you we're anything but politics as usual.
Well, on air with me is State Senator Patrick Colbeck, running the Republican primary to be the next governor of the state of Michigan. And it's interesting that, more interesting is that the Chamber of Commerce here in the state of Michigan would actually endorse someone without speaking to the other candidates to get their viewpoint.
Yeah, they don't want the rest of the board to hear what that person has to say and maybe create dissension in their ranks, because it's a lot easier for the leader of the chamber to just tell everybody who to vote for if they don't have to think for themselves.
And again, what that means, and I think you're right, it points out that we have a swamp here in Lansing, and it appears that the Chamber of Commerce, among others, are swimming in that unless someone comes and gives us an explanation why they would vote for someone or endorse someone that they have not, when they didn't interview others, is kind of interesting, especially someone who doesn't have any experience. You listen to Live with Renk. We'll be right back after this with more Senator Colbeck. You listen to Live with Renk, and for that, I appreciate it. We're trying to expose there is a swamp, not only in the federal government, but I assume it's much worse, but right here in the state of Michigan. I told you guys months ago that I always knew politics was 10 times worse than people thought. And then I was exposed to something up in Lansing that showed me that it's not 10, it's 100 times. There truly is a swamp. And these people are truly out there for themselves, many of them. Not all, many of them. And groups out there who sit there and tell you they're the most conservative, of these conservative groups, from the ground groups, battle cry, this and that. They're all bought and paid for. Unbelievable. On air with me is State Senator Patrick Colbeck, who's running for the opportunity to clean the swamp up. Is that fair to say, Senator Colbeck?
Yeah, it's a wonderful environment.
Yeah.
Probably my least favorite job I've ever had because of some of this duplicity you see going on. But you know what? If folks like myself and others don't fight that system and don't fill those slots, the people that do get in are the ones that'll run us into the ground. So we got to do something.
Right. Now, last week I spoke about the MCCA fund going up another 13-point-something%. It went up 6-point-something% the year last year. It just keeps going up, up. And we got into this big, long discussion. It was a great conversation. Tons of calls of what's going on out there, the pluses and minuses to what we have in this very generous auto insurance plans that we have out there. We got people from both sides calling in, those who are affected and are part of, our family members, part of the MCCA and are doing well. And as I was trying to explain, it's not that people are saying to throw these people out. What are the other 49 states doing is one thing, number one. And number two is we just can't let this MCCA fund just be a cash cow for these hospitals and doctors and rehab groups and all that who can charge 3-4 times more than they do for workman's comp. And I seem to remember a little bit that you may have addressed this before months ago when we spoke. What are your thoughts about that? And do you have anything out there as a state senator to address this?
Well, I've updated my approach on it since we last talked. I was focused on decreasing overall health care costs by over 20%. And we've talked about some of the free market work that I've been doing on that. But I've actually gone beyond that now and actually worked backwards from my insurance premium and identified a way to actually cut the insurance rates by 40 to as much as 60% while still retaining the unlimited coverage. And that's the basic debate. Everybody's saying, I want lower insurance rates, but then on the other side of the fence, you got folks saying, but I got a traumatic brain injury case I got to deal with that is I need that money for the lifetime of that injury. And so there's always been this ping pong match between those two sides. And I tried to identify as a way to satisfy both requirements, and I think we've got an approach, and still circulating around with some experts, but it seems to hold water right now.
Well, I think, I think, Senator Colbeck, that the question many would have, as I'm having, is can you reduce my rate by 40 to 60% and still retain the same amount of coverage? It doesn't sound right. And again, I know you're still throwing this around and massaging it, but can you give us any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I look into the numbers. Well, first of all, it's this. You remove the statutory requirements that we have around mandated coverage, and you can immediately lower it by 40%, and you can get it to 60% if you look into how that money in that Michigan Catastrophic Fund is paid. Right now, it's about a $20 billion balance. It's a little closer to $21 billion balance. Every year, we take in about $2 billion worth of surcharges in form of insurance premiums, and we pay out about $1.9 billion. But what people don't like to talk about is the fact that that $20 billion balance is actually earning about $369 million in interest. And so where does that interest go? And one of the discussions is, how can you go off and squeeze all the unlimited care that you get for the catastrophic claims, which are those claims that are above $550,000? How do you squeeze that into a $369 million bucket? And if you can do that, you can cut your insurance rates by 60%. If you can't do that and you still keep that surcharge, you can still cut the insurance rates by 40%. So my focus has been on finding ways, either through fraud abuse, through better delivery of healthcare services, to rationalizing what kind of care we're actually providing treatments for in that Michigan Catastrophic Fund, and see if there's a way to get it close to that $369 million bucket if we could. If that's the case, you can eliminate the whole surcharge.
Right, and how about a fee schedule? Now, I had someone call in last week who, when we were discussing this, I believe she said she worked for most of her life or a long time, the insurance company, and it's her understanding that they have a fee schedule, just like because these people are dealing with the insurance companies, these doctors and hospitals and all these other groups are dealing with the insurance companies who pay them and then build the MCCA fund, and then they get the money. That's all fine and dandy. She said there's a fee schedule there. And I said, if there's a fee schedule there, then why is it that I remember when Jace Bolger was Speaker of the House, he and the colleagues there all came out with these numbers where there are, if you're in workman's comp, you could get charged maybe $500 for an MRI, but MCCA will be charged $1,800. Where is this fee schedule? So why don't we just make one fee schedule for everybody?
Well, as a limited government free market guy, I have a slightly different approach to getting those numbers back in line. Rather than the government going in and mandating a fee schedule, which I don't believe in price controls, what we can do, and this is something we don't have anywhere in medicine in particular, is transparency as to the cost for these different services. So, for example, MRIs, for example, you can get them for as little as $250, $300 if you just pay out of pocket here in the state of Michigan. But if you go through insurance, whether or not it's for catastrophic claim or not, it can be as high as $3,000 to $4,000. So clearly, there's a problem that goes well beyond just the Michigan Catastrophic Fund in regards to the cost of providing certain health care services. If you go off and provide transparent services like my direct primary care service model does, like the Surgery Center Oklahoma model does, I encourage your listeners to go to surgerycenterok.com to see how medicine can be done for catastrophic care or hospital care. You go to their homepage, you click, and it's got an anatomy of the human body. You click on a body part, it tells you what the out-the-door price is for a surgical procedure. We don't have that here in Michigan. If you did, now you start being able to get the consumer back involved and actually start doing some compare and contrast, and you can drive down the prices that way.
All right, real quickly, got to take a quick break. I'll have you come on one more segment or part of it because I want to address how you would address another big issue last week. We were just jam-packed with calls and emails and Facebook postings and all that concerning the roads. Because last week, I think it was last week, where Governor Snyder came out and said the federal gas tax should be increased after all of us just got our taxes and fees increased. Online with me is State Senator Patrick Colbeck, a Republican from Canton Township, and he's running for the privilege to be the next governor of the state of Michigan. He first must get past his primary opponents, who are Attorney General Bill Schuette, Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley, and Dr. Jim Hines, who I've all had on. Dr. Hines, I don't know if I've had him on yet before, but I've told him to contact me and spoke to him personally. And, I'd love to have him on. He has not contacted me yet, so his loss. Let's go back to the phone lines. And State Senator Colbeck, appreciate you holding on. One last point I'd like you to cover is, and again, it's because it was big last week. The auto insurance was big, and road funding, and the fact that Governor Snyder has now called for and is agreed with many out there who want to increase our federal gas tax for our roads and infrastructure. Go ahead.
Yeah, we have plenty of money for the roads. As a matter of fact, after we passed that horrible gas tax increase, and that was not with my support, by the way, right after we passed that, they repurposed $400 million in general fund money that had been put towards the roads to backfill other priorities in the state budget, including Medicaid expansion potholes. So it's not about the money. It was a bait and switch since the beginning.
Oh, wait.
Around money.
Senator Colbeck, I don't know. I deal with so much every day. If I remember that. So they, just like the lottery in England did, they did a bait and switch where they said, we're going to have this lottery, so there's more money for education. And then they turned around and took out the money they were putting from the general fund into education. It was basically, could have been a zero-sum game. I'm not sure. Same thing happened here. After they increased it, they backed out $400 million that they were going. You guys voted to put towards our roads, and basically that $400 million became a zero-sum game.
Yeah, and basically the funding level, frankly, is another straw man argument. Until you actually focus on building roads that last longer, you're just going to be constantly climbing up a grease pole. We got to focus on quality. I had a retired MDOT engineer point out a stretch of road that they built 52 years ago out near Port Huron. It was called the Busha Highway. It was built 52 years ago. I went out to look at it, and that cement looks like it was poured a couple of years ago by current standards. And they got a couple patches here and there, but overall the quality was phenomenal. And it was built in swamp. So we have lost an appreciation for building higher quality roads. I've demonstrated that there are new material technologies that we should be deploying, at least testing, that would actually lower the overall life cycle cost of maintaining our roads, and it's gone on deaf ears. So we got to focus on quality, not on the total dollar amount.
So why does it go on deaf ears? Well, I don't understand.
Because it's a jobs program. It has nothing to do with being a public service. When you actually look at the transportation study that was done back in 2008 under the Granholm administration, that was picked up by Governor Snyder, the actual breakout of the analysis on how much money do we need to fix the roads actually always included a figure on the number of jobs that would be created. So it's all Keynesian economics, and they're forgetting the fact that this is supposed to be a public service, not a jobs program.
And how would you address it then?
I would focus first and foremost upon making sure that our specs are upgraded so that we have longer lasting roads. In the short term, what we got to be able to do is when we're fixing these potholes, instead of the stupid cold patch that lasts 2 to 3 weeks, I call it throw and roll. There's other techniques that are out there. They take about twice as long to go off and patch them using technologies like Durpatch, Jet Patch, Patchmaster. These technologies, the road fixes last 2 to 3 years, not 2 to 3 weeks. So while you're waiting on the full resurfacing projects using the higher quality road specs, you can at least do some better quality patches on our roadways.
I appreciate you coming on and give us your thoughts, and certainly the prospective voters out there who are going to vote in the Republican primary for governor have your viewpoints. They've heard Lieutenant Governor Calley's as well as Attorney General Schuette, who I've had on several times, both of them. And what about forums? What's going on? I know that Attorney General Schuette is refusing to have any town hall meetings with you and Lieutenant Governor Calley and Dr. Jim Hines. When is what's coming up, as well as when is Attorney General Bill Schuette determining that it's time now to discuss things with his opponents?
I think his debutante ball is going to be on May 9th out in Grand Rapids, and so far this is the only debate forum that he's agreed to. We've got another one going on tonight out at Michigan State University with everybody but him. We got another one happening at Grand Valley on Thursday, which is just myself and Dr. Hines. I think I talked to you. I was the only Republican gubernatorial candidate that challenged 3 Democrat gubernatorial candidates out in Detroit a few weeks back. So we're not afraid of taking on these challenges, which means what is the Attorney General afraid of?
Well, let me ask you this, because the pushback I get on that when I bring that up with other people in the biz is that, Colbeck needs to do it for name recognition. Schuette doesn't need to do it. He has name recognition. And if the roles are reversed, I bet you Colbeck wouldn't be doing it. That's what I hear. How do you respond to those?
That's not what leaders do. First of all, I'd like to point out that all the polls that I've seen, about 50% of the folks are undecided. So you've got the name recognition, but people see the name and they're not buying. He's got to make his case to those voters. He not only needs them in the Republican primary, he's going to need them in the general election if he were to get that far. He's not going to. We're going to get there. But it's kind of, it's an indicator of lack of leadership, and it's an indicator of a lot of fear. He doesn't believe that he can make his case to the public. And we're taking our case. We got drastically different policy positions between Lieutenant Governor and Dr. Hines on a lot of different issues. But we're taking our case out to the folks who are going to be determining who should be the next governor. And some people would prefer to be anointed into that position, and that's not the way the system of government works.
Do you not have one, did I hear, coming up in Marshall, a town hall?
It's just a meeting. It's a meet and greet. So it's not really a town hall. I'm the only candidate that's going to be there.
When are you going to be in Marshall and where?
I'm going to be at Marshall on Wednesday. And
this Wednesday, tomorrow night?
Yep.
Okay, so the Wednesday.
And actually, just if you go to colbeckforgovernor.com, and you click on events. It's up there. It's a meet and greet in Marshall at Edward Jones Financial.
Okay.
And anyway, all the details are up there at the address. It starts at 7 o'clock, goes to 9. If you guys want to come on by, it would be great to see you.
All right. Thanks a lot for calling in, Senator Colbeck. Appreciate that.
All right. Knoxville Live.
Yeah. Have a great day.